Hello, ZCAP members. Welcome and thank you for joining today's AMA. I'm Alex Bornstein from the Zcash Foundation, and I'm thrilled to host this important conversation about the future of ZCAP voting. I'm joined today by David Ernst, founder and CEO of SIV, Secure Internet Voting, who has generously agreed to share his expertise with us today. David is a longtime Zcasher, security engineer, and cryptographer. He's passionate about participatory digital democracy, and his approach blends rigorous security with a genuine interest in how technology can improve community decision-making. Over the last month or so, ZF has invited feedback in the forum about migrating from the Helios voting platform to SIV for future polls. ZCAP has essentially outgrown Helios due to limited support in the evolving needs of our community. And after thorough research and an exploratory meeting with David and his team, we were struck by how SIV's values of transparency, verifiability, and privacy align with Zcash's mission. SIV is not only open source and proven at scale, but was designed specifically for communities like ours. David, thank you for being here. And let's jump in. So to get us started and give everyone a sense of your perspective, I'd like to start with this question. If you could instantly fix one challenge with today's democratic systems, what would it be?
Great question. There's a lot of options to choose from. I hate to say it. I wish that weren't the case. But the quick one, the easiest one, in my opinion, I personally think that trying to reduce the entire world down to just a single binary option of like red versus blue or this versus that is like missing so many details. And so there's some really good theory on how that's due to our voting methods specifically. And it's like this lesser of two evils problem. Like if you're not voting for one of the two front runners, you're wasting your vote. There's like this jargon called Diverger's law. So basically the long story short would be getting far more widespread adoption for spoiler-free voting methods, of which there are a number of good ones to choose from. There's some not so good ones to choose from as well. My easy favorite would, for most elections or most cases, would probably just be what's called approval voting, which just means you take your current ballot, but you can just check all the names you like. And it's much simpler. You just remove the rule that says you can only vote for one candidate. And it turns out that the way that works out, it leaves far more people happy. It reduces the pressure for like strategic voting and not voting for your honest preferences, gives voters way more options, much less polarizing, much less of like an us versus them dynamic. It finds the things that the most people are excited about and approve and want to move forward on. And yeah, so that would be the simple quick fix. There's longer term things that I'm excited about too, but that would be the short term answer.
I'm happy to hear that say that for several reasons. One, because we use approval voting in Zcash all the time, so we agree, and that's been the approach that we've taken. And I think it's worked really well. So what inspired the founding of Secure Internet Voting, and what is the core mission that motivates your team today?
Yeah, so the long term goal is about creating safe digital democracy, like 21st century representative government, representative democracy. The current world that we're living in is based on 16th century, 17th century ideas before the internet, before computers, before electricity was really discovered. Like Benjamin Franklin doing his kite with the key and the lightning storm thing was after the Constitution. So it was just a very different world. Like literacy rates were very different. The size of the country was very different. The communication technology were very different. And so there's tons of opportunities there. And so Civ fundamentally is sort of about giving people our basic, our fundamental right as citizens, our right to vote in our pocket, in digital cyberspace, get governments to recognize us as citizens in a digital setting safely, which is the reason why we can't do it right now is because it's hard to do safely.
Got it. Awesome. So what's the big win you hope to achieve in the next 5 years for civ.org?
Yeah. So for the last 5 years, we started this around the beginning of the pandemic, around 2020. And so we've been working on building out the technology, solving a bunch of really hard technical problems, creating successful working software and running it successfully. And we've had a lot of success with that to date. Unfortunately, the voting problem is really hard from a technical point of view, especially in high stakes settings. And so there's like 12 or so really hard problems to solve, and we have really strong answers to to the vast majority of them already. And the remaining ones, we have very strong plans for how to solve them already. And so for the next 5 years, the goal would be uh, get it in front of a lot more people, get a lot more people using it, get it really a lot more vetted. Kind of, we hope that it becomes a new gold standard. It turns out like the reason is to make things more accessible and to make things digital, like I was saying, and that opens all sorts of doors to making governments much harder to corrupt and resistant to corruption and responsive and smarter. But in order to do that, there are these really hard security problems. And so it just so happens that if you use clever techniques, you can create even more verifiable voting infrastructure. And so we would love to for Civ to become like a new gold standard that like the UN is telling emerging countries to use or conflict areas to use or that election observers are using and yeah, just get many more states and nations offering it to their citizens. Right now, we've had about 30,000 people cast meaningful votes in meaningful elections, including a small number of votes in the U.S. presidential elections, and one member of Congress has actually got elected through Civ because of a weird reason. But there's lots of room for that to grow 100x, 1,000x, even just in the next few years. Now that we're in a pretty good place architecturally and from a product and engineering point of view.
Great. As a follow-up question, you mentioned there's 12, like a dozen challenges that need to be overcome. Like, can you give like just one representative example of one of those 12?
Yeah. So the three famously hard problems are identifying voters in digital voting is identifying voters, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Mhm.
Malware on voters' devices. Yeah, absolutely you need to protect against servers cheating and losing votes or changing votes. But the much harder problem is, can people trust their own smartphone to not be backdoored and secretly changing their votes? It's a lot harder to audit against. And then the other famously hard problem, these are again, this isn't a government setting, which has
Yeah.
harder requirements because your threat model is all the nation states of the world are trying to attack your system. All the intelligence agencies of the world are trying to attack your system. Partisans internally, nobody's trusted. Even the phone manufacturers are not trusted. Google and Apple, you can't trust blindly. And so yeah, the malware problem. And then the other really hard one in the government setting that the cryptography community has been really, I'd argue, kind of stuck on for a while is problems around like bribery and vote selling. There's kind of a fundamental tension that in order to protect against malware, you need to be able to verify that your vote was cast the way you wanted it to. But now that anything that you do to allow yourself to verify that, now you can share that verification with third parties. And there's a fear that this opens the door to high scale bribery attacks,
Mm.
which if you want, we can get more into. But those are kind of the hardest problems. And then there's a long tail of other problems. There's like DOS attacks, availability attacks, privacy attacks, voting multiple times, I mean, all sorts of other ones. Ballots
Yeah.
getting surreptitiously, like the actual questions that people are voting on getting changed in sneaky ways.
Yeah, when you're working on something with so many stakeholders and so many people where the outcome is so impactful for so many different communities and groups and et cetera, obviously the attack surface is pretty gigantic.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a good segue into the next question, which is what are the biggest technical challenges in designing truly secure internet voting systems, and how does Civ address them?
Yeah. So excellent question. And there's long answers and short answers. I'm gonna try to keep it short answer, and then you can direct me where you want more details.
Sure.
So yeah, so when we say like Civ, it stands for Secure Internet Voting, and part of the idea, like I sort of think of it as like there was HTTP and then there was HTTPS, like it's really for SSL, Secure Sockets Layer, getting a little to the weeds. But the point is like insecure internet voting would be bad. We don't want people to be thinking they're casting their vote one way and it's secretly getting changed or secretly getting abused or all sorts of things, or there's all sorts of just untrust in the results. And so the exact question exactly you say is what does it mean to be secure? And so I break it down fundamentally into three pillars, three foundations that an election needs in order to be a secure election. And if you have these three things, it is a secure election. If you're missing any of the three, it's not a secure election. And so the first one is one person, one vote. In general, with voting, you have a known list of people who can cast votes. Only they're allowed to cast votes and only once each. No one's allowed to cast a million votes individually. And so having some system to be able to do that. And also, really what you want is some way to audit after for other people to audit the fact that that was done correctly, that there weren't ballot stuffing or fake voters being added. And so that's a whole big pillar of the problem. And then the other obvious one is that whatever vote people are trying to cast, that it actually does get counted and cast correctly. It's not getting lost or changed or mistabulated. And so I usually call it verifiable results, sort of like the integrity of the thing.
Mhm.
And so those are two pretty obvious ones. And then the one that a lot of people don't think about, although I'd imagine the Zcash community thinks about vastly more than the average person, is privacy. Voting has really unique privacy requirements. There's this fundamental idea that in order to have a free and fair election, you need to have private voting because otherwise people are subject to peer pressure or groupthink or like these coercion or bribery attacks like I was talking about before. And so that's a whole nother web of problems. But at a high level, the basic idea is just that the more people can have some reason to believe that no one will find out how they will vote, the more they can cast their honest choice, as opposed to just what's sometimes called preference falsification, this kind of jargony term for it. And so these are the three goals: is one person, one vote, or voter authentication, verifiable results, like prevention against tampering, and then strong vote privacy. And unfortunately, they kind of conflict, and that's part of what makes it so hard. So in like technical settings, like credit cards are authenticated, but they're not private. Or Tor is private, but it doesn't have a one person, one or like Bitcoin or Zcash private, but you can have unlimited as many wallets as you want. And so it's hard to get both the authenticatedness that you need and the privacy that you need. And so that's kind of originally what Civ was all about trying to solve, is using these academic ideas of some powerful cryptographic ideas so that you can be confident about who voted, but each individual's vote itself is strongly private and strongly protected. Yeah, I'll stop there and I just
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, the next question, how do you approach transparency versus privacy and voting infrastructure? Like, where do you draw the line there?
yeah. Yeah, the basic idea for Civ is that who voted is known at the very least to the election administrator, and then it's up to the election administrator if they want to publish that to the public at large. And it's sort of like fundamentally the Civ algorithm is you have a known list of voters, a big list of people. Each voter creates their private transaction, their vote. Those all go in a big pile of encrypted votes. And then once you have your million encrypted votes, they go through this anonymizing mixnet and they all get shuffled up. And so that removes the link between the individual vote and the person that cast the vote. But you still have it's the digital analog to vote by mail. So like with if you're doing vote by mail, you fill out your ballot on a piece of paper and then you put it inside an envelope. And on the outside of the envelope, it has your name on it or you sign it with your signature and you send that in to the election administrator. And so Civ is the same idea. You get your ballot on your phone, you click your selections, and then that whole thing gets sealed inside an encrypting envelope, kind of, you could think of it as. And then on the outside of that encrypted payload, you attach some authentication info about who sent it in. And so the administrator can see, okay, this vote came from David, this vote came from Alex, this vote came from John Doe or Alice or Bob. But you don't know the privacy of the vote stays protected until it goes through this anonymizing layer, a mix net. And yeah, so that's the basic idea. Everyone's vote should ideally always stay private.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so what new frontiers do you see for secure digital identity that might enable better voting or civic participation?
Yeah. So digital identity is extremely valuable and extremely important if we could get it right. And I hate to say it, but there just aren't really great answers right now. It's a pretty, yeah, it's in many ways it's kind of the field that's lacking in a lot of ways, kind of the most. And it's kind of how I got into this work in the first place. I can get into that. But if it's a huge problem, not just in civic settings, but even in mundane settings like fake Amazon reviews and just like e-com, scammers on the internet and spam and all sorts of other problems. But then also in civic settings, um, like in terms of discussion forums, like all the sock puppet, like digital bot armies and sock puppets on social media,
Mhm.
and which if people look into the details, there's some really crazy examples. And even in more formal settings, like there was this thing from many years back around net neutrality. There's like the FCC, the American FCC put out this like request for comments, and they got hundreds of thousands of they had like a form on their website to send in comments, and they got hundreds of thousands of requests for comments or comments themselves saying, it's fine. I want, Verizon told me they'd give me cheaper access if we remove these rules. And the responses themselves had names and addresses given, and you could look them up, and they were actual voters. The voter file itself is public. People's names and info is not that protected. But it turns out that there was like a lobbying firm that had created all of these hundreds of thousands of comments. And just like a few people, I don't know if it was a script or this was all pre-LLM, but nowadays it's only gotten even easier with LLMs. And so, yeah, it's pretty bad. And so just being like basically democracy on the internet doesn't work at any scale beyond like Dunbar's number of like a small group of people that you actually know yourself.
Mhm.
And so that's not great. And if we had much better identity, it would be much better. And yeah, there's been a lot of really cool attempts. It's a space that I follow very closely. There's some really interesting projects trying to do decentralized identity. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I don't think any of them are like obvious winners, like home runs. Some of them kind of work at certain scales, but they have various usability challenges. And in general, with identity, it's always a trade-off between cost, speed, accessibility, and difficulty to defraud. So there's lots of different options, and they all will fall somewhere on those various dimensions. And so there's pretty good options, but they just cost like $1 a voter, which isn't that high even, except when you're trying to include 300 million people. And it's like we last year tried to set up a nationwide, we were working with a bunch of people to set up nationwide primaries because a lot of people were upset about the lack of primaries and among the Democratic Party. And yeah, the cost is just a barrier. And some people were willing to put up money, but so that would make a huge difference. And the really excited, like one thing that makes me very excited, and part of the whole reason why we started Civ in the first place is that it costs some money, and you really want your identity system to have this property of what's called neutrally credible, as in like everybody can believe that there's not like one central party that has some biased ability to make up fake people or disenfranchise people. And so the reality is we're already as taxpayers, just the US alone and all the democracies of the world, the US alone spends billions of dollars running elections every year. And all the other there's like 71 democracies around the world, like basically half the countries of the world are democracies. And so as taxpayers, we're already spending a lot of money. It works out to about $20 per person to run our election infrastructure. And so one of the really great benefits of Civ, among other benefits long term, is that once you cast a vote in a Civ election, your vote itself is actually kind of like a public key that you're submitting because it's paired the details that go into encrypting your vote stay on your own device. And so you can actually create a digital signature, digital identity out of that private piece of information. And so what that means is that if you have ever voted in a civ election once, you can now unforgeably prove for free to anyone that you were a specific voter or one of an anonymous voter. There's some really cool techniques to anonymize who you were specifically. And so basically, like I was saying, it's the basic fundamental right of citizens of a right to vote. And so that then extends to all sorts of other use cases. And it has this other really interesting property as well, which I wish that this wasn't at all even on the table, but it can't be taken away from you. Once you've established this, it creates unforgeable proof that at least in the 2025 election, my government recognized me as a voter, as a legitimate voter, member of the community. And so if the government later becomes undemocratic, because of for whatever reason you could imagine, you've already established that strong digital identity system. And so it's kind of analogous in the privacy world. There's these notions of like what's called like forward secrecy. And and so it's kind of analogous. It's like forward identity that like even if later you no longer have a cooperative government, it can't be taken away, which is really powerful. And so, yeah, that's a really fascinating topic as well. And so the basic idea is just that we can provide software for local governments to make it really easy and safe, and it actually saves them a bunch of money compared to the paper process because you don't have to mail millions and millions of pieces of paper all this way and that way. And and it's a better experience for the voters and a much faster experience. And the administrators can prove that they're not cheating. And now it also establishes proof of citizenship in this way that grows over time. So you can say, like every election, like, look, I voted, I have proof for the 2024 election and the 2026 and the 2028. And so it can kind of build up again and again over time, which has all sorts of really interesting implications for, like right now, the internet is a very low trust space. And so it'd be very powerful if we could turn it into a much higher trust space where you don't have to be as worried about scammers at all times. Okay, sorry for such
Yeah,
a long answer, but
no,
some
it's great.
thoughts.
I think you're aware at ZF, we recently launched the Shielded Aid Initiative to work with humanitarian aid organizations on bringing privacy to their blockchain projects. And, it's a huge topic of conversation in that world, digital identity solutions to figure out, how can we ensure we're giving aid to the people that we intended to give it to, but at the same time, on the recipient side, how can I control my own data? How can I opt out if circumstances change? It's like an incredibly challenging problem from start to finish. It's not like there's one part of it that's like, oh, if we solve this one piece, it'll all work. There's multiple issues within there that all need to be solved, basically at the same time to ensure dignity, privacy, transparency, and that ultimately, people are getting the aid that they need to survive. So yeah, a huge topic of conversation at ZF these days, and I think we've been a bit surprised at what we found, and maybe not the lack of progress, but like I guess I personally, as I've done research, would have assumed we were further down the road with solutions than we actually are. Is that it seems to me like you're saying basically the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been a huge blocker for a long time. I mean, there's a very famous cartoon. I think it's from like 1994 from the New Yorker. It's like on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Yep.
And it hasn't changed like 30 years later. Here we are. And in some ways, it's actually gotten worse because now we have LLMs that can spit out convincing looking text, a million words for 50 cents. And and now we also have the video deepfakes as well. Not just Photoshop, but I can run software and right now on this call I could make myself look like Albert Einstein or Taylor Swift, and I can move my body and it looks as imperceptibly to you exactly like whatever chosen person I've named. And so in some ways that's kind of made it worse because it's a constant cat and mouse game of like defenders and attackers. And the attackers' tools have gotten better. And the defenders' tools gotten a little bit better because like cryptography is now cheap. Cryptography used to be expensive computationally. But yeah, it's not great. Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, thanks for not showing up looking like Taylor Swift to our call today. I appreciate that.
Or
Confused me.
not, thanks. Maybe people would like that. I hear
Yeah,
she's
who knows?
popular.
um, what are the main benefits and challenges of applying SIV's internet voting system to ZCAP's decentralized, privacy-focused community polls?
Totally. So, I mean, at a high level, it's just about making it really easy for people to weigh in safely and privately and verifiably and just streamline it. There's a lot of good options there. And I think in many ways, the Zcap community is already being served by that to a certain extent with Helios, as has been happening for a few years. And so I think the particular, as you were saying in the beginning, kind of outgrown it. Some of the particular advantages, it's just like, unfortunately, Helios has been in maintenance mode for like a decade, like almost 2 decades now.
Mhm.
And super inspiring. Just to be clear, I actually learned about these techniques from reading the PhD thesis that became Helios in the first place. So it's 100% like a part of this whole conversation. But yeah, so also just making the process a lot easier for the administrators, I think could also be nice in a lot of ways, making it just much easier to create votes and potentially to the extent it's desired to be able to do it in a more ongoing basis when there are disputes. And it's really, I'm really fast. I've become really fascinated over the last few years. I didn't actually start out with this interest, but because I've been working on these tools, I've become really fascinated by this question of what answer will people give when their name and identity is attached to a thing versus what answer will they give when they have strong privacy? Like we know who's weighing in, but you're and what are the topics that lead to the biggest gap there? If you ask, everybody under this setting, and then you ask them the exact same, or yeah, and then you ask them the exact same question again with privacy, will there be how much of a difference will there be there? And which topics lead to more of a difference there? And yeah, I think from my point of view, it's all about countering groupthink. And like there's the famous fable of the emperors not wearing any clothes and no one's willing to tell the emperor to their face that they're not wearing to wear that no one is willing to tell the emperor that they're naked except for like the little boy who doesn't have any self-restraint. And then once the little boy says it, then everybody, then the floodgates open and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, of course, of course, of course." So people are kind of scared to stand out and go first, which there's really good evolutionary reasons for that. When we on the savannah 50,000 years ago, we lived in small tribes. If you got socially isolated from your small tribe, you very well might not survive. I mean, it's a matter of life or death. And so our brains have been evolutionarily conditioned to be super in tune with social cues and social signals and who's up and who's down and who has status and who's on which team.
Mhm.
And sometimes it can make us do funky things and our brain can kind of fall out the window. And so the benefit is really about catching problems as early as possible before they grow into big problems. Like big problems start out as small problems, and if people are afraid to call them out when they're still small problems, then they get neglected and then they grow into big problems. And so from a functional pragmatic point of view, that's what I would really hope to see is just that things are unfortunately, nobody's perfect. Sometimes we make mistakes. And so being able to have constructively critical feedback from people that do care, that are on our team, that do want the best, I think could be really helpful and useful. That's kind of what I would hope to see. And again, just make the whole thing easy and fast and maybe fun. Oh, and I guess one other thing on a slightly different thread is also we've spent like what I was talking about earlier, I love alternative voting methods. And so we've spent a good amount of time I've spent a lot of time looking at alternative voting methods and working on them, and so we already support a good number. And so there's some other situations that might also be useful. There was a lot of interest, I remember, from the forum posts on we have these tools around participatory budgeting, which could be really interesting, where people can say, okay, we have this pool of $10,000, and each person could should say, I think this project should get 10% of it. I think this project should get 5% of it, and this project should get 40% of it. And then you can aggregate and consolidate those in cool ways. And we have another really cool one that we haven't published yet for pairwise rankings, which just makes it much easier to rank things side by side in a really cool way using like a chess scoring algorithm, the ELO ranking. But anyway, the point is just that that can open easier ways for people to make their opinions known more that matches how they actually feel instead of being forced into a very constraining box. So I hope that would also be useful.
Yeah, great. And I should also say that, Helios has worked great for us for years, and we appreciate its development and the fact that it's been like a really solid option for us during this time. It just feels as we evolve, as the Zcash community evolves, it's time to just evolve this system along with it and ensure that we're not only keeping up, but we're able to maybe, like you just said, offer some alternative ways of doing things that would be beneficial for the whole community. So, like the fact that we're able to solve what was a short-term problem, like looking for a Helios replacement, but connected with you guys, and now we can have like a far bigger, more strategic conversation, has been a bit unexpected and like extremely welcome from our perspective, and I know from yours as well. So yeah,
100%.
it's fantastic. Um, how would you ensure the transparency and integrity of ZCAP votes when we use SIV, given the need for both privacy and auditability in Zcash governance?
Yeah, so at a high level, the whole system, it separates out who voted from how individuals vote, which that gets encrypted on your own device and then gets anonymized through this cryptographic mixnet. And so every individual's vote privacy gets protected. The slight nit there is there's some decisions to be made in deciding who gets to be a member of the mixnet. And so working that out is an ongoing thing that we're excited. We already have some pretty good solutions, and there's all sorts of ways that we can optimize that even better. But I think this community especially will be, I can already tell that people are really good about coming up with good solutions and lots of ways there. So that's on the privacy part side of things. On the auditability side of things, it's every single the SIP system it has there's multiple pieces, and so there's like 5 steps in the SIV protocol. You can go to civ.org/protocol to see like an illustrated guide to it. But basically, each step provides written proof that step went correctly. And so um, you can kind of dig into making sure that the authentication system only allowed the right voters to cast the right votes. Again, if I don't think this is exactly in the threat model, but you can detect against malware on your own device. If people are concerned about that, make sure that their votes actually, that their own device is not cheating, which is pretty powerful. And you can get to this property called software independence, which is like anyway. And then that the mixnet itself, that all the votes are received properly and votes aren't being lost. And then the mixnet itself is working properly. And there's some cool cryptographic proofs that prove that. But that's highly technical. People are 100% welcome to look into it and study it. And we would enjoy that. And it's great to always make it easier, especially this community. People are very qualified to do that. But then at the end of the vote, once all the votes are unlocked, we have a much, much simpler way for individuals to verify that their vote was counted correctly, which is that every vote, when you're making your selections on your own device, your device picks a random number. It's like a 12-digit random number. And so at the end of the election, that number gets encrypted with your vote itself inside the encryption. And so it's unique random number, unique to your vote. Nobody else knows it. The administrator doesn't know it. The system doesn't know it. And so then at the end of the election, once all the votes get unlocked, all the individual votes are listed. Unlike Helios and some other systems where the votes all get summed up while they're still encrypted, in Civ, all the individual votes get decrypted. And so you can just control F and find my vote was 83921. You can go find it. It's very quickly. It takes like less than 30 seconds to do that. It doesn't require any sort of technical training at all. It doesn't require trusting any computers at all. You can do it with paper printouts. We've done it. Thousands and thousands of people have done it at this point of all different levels of technical sophistication. And so it's pretty great. You can just see for yourself that your vote actually made it in there. And then the last piece I'll add is that you can you might if people are really concerned about the results, and it's always people's right to challenge, people should be convinced that results are correct. The whole philosophy of Civ is don't just trust us. You should actually be able to verify. We want to give you active proof of correct results. And so just being able to check your own vote isn't necessarily enough because what about everybody else's vote? And so we've also developed some really cool techniques extending what are known as risk limiting audits or post-election audits, where you can take a random sample, like a random percent, a random number of votes, and spot and work with the voter to spot check those individual votes. And it turns out that the math there scales exponentially. Your chance of catching your vote on any catching a failed vote is like 1% on each term. And so your false positive rate is 0.99. But the more you do it, it's like 0.99 squared and then 0.99 to the third and then 0.99 to the fourth and fifth. And so without getting too lost in the weeds, the point is just that you only have to do a very small number of these checks and you can get really high confidence that the final outcome was correct, even if people aren't taking that time to vote to check the results themselves. Which again is another really great thing about Civ I skipped over, which is that Civ lets everyone verify after the election has taken place. Unlike, I mean, Helios does have this property as well, but unlike most paper voting systems, you have to watch the whole election in real time as it's taking place to make sure votes aren't getting switched out or ballots aren't being stuffed or votes aren't going missing. And if you miss it in real time while it's happening, that's your only opportunity to catch it. Unlike that, Civ is a digital, it's more like a blockchain, like Zcash uh, or just any digital asynchronous messaging system where you can verify the results at any point after the fact. And the system automatically stores all the information every voter needs on their own device, never leaves their own device, so that you don't have to do any work ahead of time to like typically when people are first casting their vote, they're not really thinking about it. And then it's after the results get announced, that's when they're like, oh, this is very surprising. How could this possibly be? I don't believe these results. And so the software already preps you to be able to check for yourself at that point. So the long story short is that there's just a lot of verifiability every step along the way, and it's very rigorous, and there's all sorts of ideas of defense in depth. And don't take our word for any of this. If you find flaws in anything we're saying, we would love for you to point it out to us. We actually, last year, we ran this big contest at DEF CON. I think that's actually how we originally connected. And we're excited to do it again, where we're giving people money no matter what. We have big prize pools, and the best people that can point out our weaknesses and flaws, we want to send money to. So we just want to adopt this posture of, the security is first and foremost paramount. That's what it's all about. We definitely don't want to be doing security theater type stuff at any point. And it's all open source as well. People can inspect, and we're human too. We make mistakes, but help us find the mistakes as soon as possible, and that would be great.
And we know Zcashers love digging into technical details and tearing things apart, and I'd love to see that happen with this system as well, and give you some actionable feedback if it exists. So good
Some
group of
early stuff.
people to
Without a
kind
doubt.
of a good group of people to throw that challenge out to for sure. You've kind of answered this, but I'm gonna give you a chance to just make sure we haven't missed anything. But are there features in Civ's platform such as cryptographic verifiability delegation or anti-censorship safeguards that you think would uniquely benefit the ZCAP voting process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, at a high level, our philosophy is make something that's as easy, make a voting way to poll people that's as easy to use as Google Forms, very streamlined for the person setting it up and for the people responding, but then under the hood has like signal messenger level of security that people can always look into each step along the way. But leave the happy path very streamlined, and then people can inspect at their own pace or leisure or whenever issues come up. And so I just think that's very, very well aligned with this community in so many ways because it is such a technology forward community in so many ways. And also really values the importance of privacy, of course, and which I do as well for a whole bunch of reasons. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of great alignment there. And also just making the process look good and not have a lot of friction. I think that itself is kind of in a lot of ways it's not like a feature so much as it's just like a feeling, a vibe that we've spent a lot of work on trying to sand off the rough edges as much as possible. And we can always continue to improve, not that we're done. And yeah, I think that kind of covers it in a lot of ways. Just keep things easy, but then allow people to always opt in to the more advanced features whenever that comes up. And I'm excited. Like you said, the constructively critical feedback. I mean, I just love when thoughtful people really engage with this sort of stuff. So that's what we're making it for. And so that's really great.
Well, we've talked about this a few times, but how can Zcashers be helpful to SIV? Are there some other things we haven't discussed that would also be helpful for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I mean, the very, very short, quick thing I would say is if you want to join along, follow along, if you go to the website, siv.org, siv.org, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's like a newsletter sign up thing. We're very, very sparse with that. I think we've probably sent like two messages over the last 2 years or something like that. And everything always has opt out, unsubscribe links and everything. But that would be one way to, at the very least, begin to get engaged. It takes 30 seconds type of thing. At a higher level, yeah, just engaging with the thing, letting us know, pointing out when things aren't working so well. We have open GitHub issues, or you can message us privately. If people want to get involved, there's tons and tons of projects that could use smart, thoughtful people contributing to. If people want to have a sense of that, again, if you go to the civ.org website, right at the top, there's a link that says contributors, and there's a whole bunch of people that have contributed various ways and various things, from technical things to more like communication things to interacting, getting introductions to there's certain people that are especially impactful and relevant, funding side of things. And yeah, and on the funding side of things, one thing that could be especially interesting is we're really excited about this HackCiv program that we started setting up. And so the basic idea is we have this prize pool. It's a set time amount of period. So the last one we did at DEF CON, it was $10,000 over the period. It started a week before DEF CON and it continued through DEF CON. And so the basic idea is no matter what, we're guaranteed giving away the money. We don't want it to be a question of like us being stingy with like not thinking things are good. So no matter what, we're giving away the money, and then it's just a question of who earns it. And so the best submissions earn it. And we did something really fun as well this last time where we decided half of the allotment and the other half was decided by anyone and everyone at DEF CON was allowed to be a public judge. And so they could say, this is the best submission or that's the best submission. So we don't totally control the thing. And of course, we ran that using Civ itself. Part of the idea there was if you found an exploit to be able to cheat, then you can now use your own exploit to send yourself money, which we thought was totally in scope and great. Sadly, nobody figured out a way to do that. Um, but yeah, we're very excited about doing that again. But in order to do that again, we need to fundraise some new money to be able to run the next round of that. And so if people want to contribute to that as like sponsors and be supporters and contributors to that, could be as personal individuals or through companies if they want to be associated with this great stuff. That's definitely another way to be engaged or to just participate in the contest as well. And kind of the rule, just to make this clear, any submissions that come in between contests are still entered into the next contest. So there's no incentive to like sit on to like wait and not submit things because you think you're not going to get paid. We'll always roll new submissions in because if there are problems, we want to find out as soon, the sooner the better. And yeah, so just engaging with that. We're also just on that line of HackCiv. It's hacks.civ.org is kind of the headquarters of that whole process. We did it at DEF CON this first time last year, and now we've been doing it with some universities as well. And we're excited to do it with more universities as well, or more companies. And so if you have a security-minded place, the university ones are really fun because the students get super into it and it's like a fun competition and contest. And so if you have a place that might be interested in hosting something like that, that could be really fun. And so we'd love to work with you around that. I think that's kind of a high level thing. Just reach out. We try to be very accessible. If you have good ideas or you see ways in which we're doing things wrong. It's kind of high level.
Yeah, it's great. There's so many different ways to engage on so many different levels. It's really fantastic, and I hope some people in the Zcash community take you up on some of those options because we've got incredibly talented, passionate people who care deeply about the work you're doing, and would love to see them contribute in some ways to helping you progress this forward. Well, so before I wrap up, is there anything I didn't ask that you'd like to bring up, or anything you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
That's a good question. Oh, this isn't really a question. It's just an observation. I've been thinking. I guess I just want to share it. In the forum post, I've been thinking about this a lot. It's not really a question, but in the forum post, some people mentioned some way to use Zcash itself as the privacy layer for voting. And I've just been thinking about that a lot, if that's actually possible. Some other people pointed out some problems with that of how do you make sure one person, one vote. And yeah, I don't know. If people have more ideas about that, I would love to hear from you how that's possible, because that could be quite cool in some ways, which is something that's been on my mind a lot the last month or so.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll be sure to project that out there, and hopefully somebody will reach out with further ideas on that. We'd love to see more. Just how these two communities, clearly there's a lot of synergy here. We're doing similar things in many ways. It would be great to just be further engaged. When we connect with like-minded individuals and groups and companies, we do a good job. We need to do an even better job of kind of helping each other progress forward, because we're all contributing in a really meaningful way. That's a meaningful and necessary way to privacy, all the
Usable
things that we
privacy.
care deeply about.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's so much shared overlap of values, and yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, well, thanks a lot, David. Like, really appreciate you spending this time and giving us an insightful look into Civ. Thanks to the Zcash community for your engagement, as always. ZCAP is only as strong as the people who participate, and your voices will help guide this next chapter as we transition away from Helios. Please keep the conversation going in the forum. Please, look at the resources that we share. Look for ways to get engaged. And we want to hear from you, and I know Civ wants to hear from you as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the great questions.
Great.